It's good to see him and meet him in person. We have Congressman Gary Palmer in the studio with us. Congressman, how are you today?
I'm good, Joy. I was just sitting here thinking about the last time I was on a radio station in Montgomery. It was with Don Markwell.
Oh my! He still haunts the upstairs halls. It's hard to fill that man's shoes. What a legacy!
Well, at that time, I was doing a radio show with Leland Whaley, and I came in to see Don, and he said, "Gary, you're an excellent writer, but you're terrible on radio." So Don didn't hold anything back.
Oh, he really was, and I'm trying to live up to that biting wit he had.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Now, there's so many places to begin, but I think this is a fun place to begin because I'm just getting to know you. I know you've been in Congress many years now, but tell me
9 years, 5 days.
9 years, 5 days. So tell me about Hackleburg, where you grew up.
Well, it was a tiny little town, maybe 1,200 people, 1,500 people. I was my graduating class had 41 in it. It's the largest class I'd ever had. My dad had about an 8th grade education. He was a logger, so I grew up going to the woods with him, skidding logs with mules, and developed a great love for the woods, but also a tremendous work ethic. My dad, he thought if you finished high school, that was enough. You earned your living with the sweat of your brow, and passed that on to my brothers and me. My youngest brother didn't get that experience. He's 12 years younger than me, but I've got a brother a year and a half younger than me, and a sister, and we all worked. And my grandpa had a farm. I picked cotton, and he had cows. And but when he got ready to convert from farming row crop, my brother and I sowed the what had been a cotton field with fescue. But my mom had finished high school. Nobody on either side of the family, immediate family, had ever gone to college. I was the first. And then my brother next to me went and got a master's in education, teaching and coaching in Tennessee. My sister had a career in banking. My youngest brother played football at Alabama. I walked on the football team at Alabama. And he got a degree in civil engineering. My mom had always wanted to be a nurse. She had me 7 days before she turned 20. And put everything on hold. And then when the 3 older of us left the house, she went back to school and got a nursing degree and changed the whole family. And so I worked for a couple of engineering companies and then started the Alabama Family Alliance, which became Alabama Policy Institute. But I am Hackleburg. That's right. I don't like a lot of attention, which seems really weird being a member of Congress, but that's one of the reasons you don't see my face on Fox News all the time and that kind of thing. I just think we're here to help people and work hard and do the best you can.
Does your mind ever just go, wow, when, say you're your congressional office, do you ever have those sort of flashback, those sort of memories to work in the farm where you're like, what a trip life can be sometimes where I'm at now?
Yeah, I'm a person of strong Christian faith, and I believe that God has a plan for us, has a purpose for us, and you wind up running in the ditch a time or two on the way. But I knew I was a little bit different. I love to read, and I love to read history. And I remember one time, I think it's 1968, 69. I was maybe 14, and Dad had to fix a clutch on one of his trucks, and it was like a Saturday, and we're down in the woods, and it's just him and me, and he's under the truck, and he asked me to get him a wrench, and I didn't hear him, and he comes out from under the truck, and I'm sitting down in the woods on a stump reading the history of World War I, and he didn't think it was all that funny, but that's just who I was. I'd take a book with me. We didn't have a library in Hackleburg. We had a bookmobile. And every 2 weeks, I see nodding, I'd walk to town and check out a book and turn in one. So that really helped me because I think it gave me a sense of what a great country we live in. I believed all that stuff I read about George Washington and Abe Lincoln and I joke that my favorite movie was the Disney Davy Crockett movie. I wanted to be like Davy Crockett. When I was a little kid, I refused to believe that he died because he's still swinging when the movie ended. You know, it's just, I am a product of living in a great country. And there are other people like that I know that there's just not many places that somebody could grow up like I did. And my dad built the house I grew up in, and he only finished what he could pay for. And so the bedroom that I shared with my brother had cardboard between the two befores, didn't have a door, didn't have a closet. The only bedroom that had a door was my parents' bedroom. We heated it with a coal heater, which the left would go nuts over now, and used a window fan in the summertime. But we had 2 huge gardens, and Dad grew potatoes like he thought there'd never be another one. That's just how I grew up. That's who I am.
Now, and again, folks, we're talking to Congressman Gary Palmer. He is currently the congressman for the 6th district, but there has been redistricting. So you're still running for the 6th district, but it looks a little different these days. And before we get into some more of the issues, and I think a little more of your biography, this is always, especially if you're an avid, voracious reader, maybe it's one book, maybe 1, 2, 3, that just will blow your hair back that everybody should read. It's sort of the books that give you that insight into the world.
Well, I know everybody's going to say the obvious answer is the Bible, but there are other books that really had an impact, and a lot of those are the ones that I've read twice. And one of them was The Spirit of the Disciplines by a guy, Dallas Willard, who I met through Focus on the Family. But it really challenged me in that regard, The Spirit of the Disciplines. And from a history biography, I read a biography of George Washington that hardly anybody knows about. It was a 2-volume set by a guy named Harrison Clark entitled All Cloudless Glory. And when I started reading that when I first started the Alabama Family Alliance, and I went for about a year and didn't get paid, and it was a struggle. And I'd come home thinking, I can't do this anymore. And,
Right.
I worked for 2 engineering companies. I wasn't a policy guy. I was just trying to immerse myself in policy, and we'd have dinner with the kids and play with the kids, get them to bed, and then I'd sit down and start reading that book and read about all that Washington had to put up with, all that he went through, all of the backbiting and the efforts to remove him as commander. And I'd stop reading. I'd think, if he could put up with this, I can do this. And so that's one of my favorite biographies of Washington. There's I probably read 8 to 10 books a year. And I read a lot on leadership, and one of them is Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. It's a great book. And it really puts in perspective what the personality and attitude of a leader ought to be. You're there to serve other people. And the real test of a leader is not how many accolades they accumulate, how high up in the rank they go. It's how well the people under them do. And it's a really good book. The last book I read was by David Bernhardt. He was the Secretary of Interior under Trump at the last couple of years of the Trump administration, and it's You Report to Me. It is the best insight into how the administrative state has taken over governing. And there's probably at least 2, maybe 4 bills that I'm going to introduce from that book. But it's the clearest explanation of how we really have lost representative government. And if you watch what Biden's doing right now, it is a deluge of new rules and regulations coming out. And it is government by administrative state.
Well, and so when you mentioned you helped set up what became the Alabama Policy Institute here in Alabama, it wasn't just Alabama you did this in, though, right? You helped set up think tanks around the nation.
Yeah, and we had a meeting out in Colorado Springs in 1992. Former Secretary of Education, William Bennett, was there. The Heritage Foundation was there, and I was invited to come because when I set up the Alabama Family Alliance, we weren't doing just the pro-life and things like that. We were doing our economic issues as well, because I believe that all public policy is family policy. And if you go to the grocery store today, you're finding out that it is. And so in '92, they asked me to come to this meeting, and it was to talk about setting up an umbrella organization to try to get a think tank in every state. And we probably could have all met in this room at that time, but they not only invited us to join, they elected me to the board, and I served 3 terms on the board. In the last my last term, I served as chairman of that board. We now have 65 state-based think tanks, and their combined budgets are over $350 million. So they've had quite an impact. And it's interesting, too, got involved with an international group called the Atlas Economic Foundation. It was at that time led by a guy from Argentina named Alejandro Chofuen, who married a lady from Michigan, and started working, helping them to get think tanks started around the world. And we wrote a book on environmental issues called Facts Not Fear that made the front page of the New York Times and Washington Post. It was on CNN headline news all day on Earth Day in '97. And it was up for the Fisher Prize, which this international economic group put out. And I think we came in second, but we wound up with that first edition going into 9 printings and going all over the world. And then the second edition, I don't know how many printings it went into.
So I think we've laid a lot of the groundwork, and because, I'm just getting to know you, I imagine some folks in this audience just getting to know you wanted to lay some of that out. I think your credentials are impeccable, I'll put it that way. And the fact that you are in a position of responsibility for policy for the Republicans in the House also, I think, it's a heavy duty. And so there on this show, I constantly am kind of waxing poetic, laying out the big picture of the trends that seem to be going wrong, where we're going as a nation, just maybe the pathologies in the population, but also the pathologies coming from the Biden administration and the administrative state. But I don't want to put words in your mouth or take up the time we have here. If you had to kind of give a big picture of what has gone wrong, and what are say maybe a few buckets of how we can tackle this. And I know there are always realities in Washington, so let's play this game like you kind of have a magic wand, and this is where the Republican caucus would want to take things. Republican conference would want to take things. What is sort of the big picture approach going forward here?
Well, I think we've got to get the White House. We've got to hold the majority in the House, and we've got to get the majority in the Senate. And I think Donald Trump is the guy that I think can get these things done. And I've been working with them. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal article that came out in the middle of December about the new group that is advising President Trump. I kind of got outed in the article as one who, but the things that I want people to understand is this can be fixed, but the window is closing. Mm-hmm. I know we're at $34 trillion in debt. But I had a colleague tell me that we're bankrupt, and I said, well, we're not. You're bankrupt when your liabilities exceed the value of all your assets. And we have enormous assets. And what the Biden administration has done is unbelievable. We've never seen anything like it in history. The 2 years that they had the White House, the House, and the Senate, they increased spending by over $10 trillion. That's what, I mean... This just launched us into this debt crisis. What I've suggested and to the president is a number of things. One, on energy, we need to look at opening up our energy resources. We are an energy superpower.
Yep.
And the world is, there's emerging economies in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. China has pretty much displaced us down there. I should have brought, I've got this out in the truck. I should have brought it in to show you where we were in terms of trade in 2000 versus where we are now. And they're the dominant impact player in Latin America. So what I've done is I spoke at a global energy conference, and there were diplomats from all over, but particularly from Europe. And I said, look, the war in Ukraine did not create the energy crisis. It exposed it.
Right.
And I said, if you haven't learned anything else from this war, other than this one point, that no nation should be reliant on an adversarial nation for anything that's critical to its economy and its national security as energy. And I said, you may think that you're going to go 100% renewables, this Green New Deal stuff, and no longer be reliant on Russia or OPEC or anybody else like that. But you'll be 100% reliant on China, and that's worse. So I launched a thing called the Western Hemisphere Alliance. And guys, I've literally had a delegation from the Philippines, from Azerbaijan, had the president of Kosovo in my office, from Latin America, the ambassador from El Salvador wants to host a lunch. I was just on the phone yesterday or day before yesterday with the former Canadian ambassador to the United Nations. And this is what I think President Trump can do that nobody else can do, is pull this together, open up our energy resources, start selling liquefied natural gas and oil. We could sell coal on off federal lands on the condition, we'll sell it to them at a reduced rate on the condition that they put in the same environmental emissions controls that we use here.
Sure.
And our companies would design it, build it, and install it. I worked for Combustion Engineering in the Environmental Systems Division, then worked for Rust International and did everything from refuse to energy to aerospace. We can do this, and we can start selling energy futures out to these emerging economies, because if we don't, you know who's going to do it? China.
100%.
You hear this, you probably heard this, China's building one coal plant a week.
Yep.
They're not just in China. They're building them, and these emerging economies are not going to sit back and deny them life-saving, life-changing access to energy. And guys, we will never run out of natural gas. We will never run out of oil. We'll never run out of coal. The other big issue is how reliant we become on China for critical minerals and rare earth.
Mm-hmm.
We've identified 50 critical minerals in the U.S., and 12 of them we're 100% reliant on another nation. We've got them, but we don't mine them. We don't refine them. So I suggested and there's another 30-something that over half of them are imported. So what I've suggested to President Trump's team is that we make it a top priority to permit the mining for critical minerals and the refinery and do it at the same day. We're not going to violate any environmental laws, but we're not going to wait 7, 8, 10 years to get a permit.
Right.
China doesn't do that.
Right.
And we'll never catch up if we don't. And we're going to wind up. If China were to take out Taiwan, 80% of the microchips and semiconductors would be wiped out, 90% of the advanced ones. And we'd be in a worldwide depression. We need to be able to make those things here, not assemble them from parts from China.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I appreciate the framing as a competition or the rivalry with China, because you said you've been there 9 years. So if you get up there kind of 2014, this is the tail end, I'd imagine, of people, the last gasp of hope of, if we make China rich, they'll become more liberal like us. And that gamble started in the 90s really has hit us right in the face. So now, is there kind of, even across the aisle, across any divides, a kind of awakening to the threat of China?
It really started with some of the things they were doing on 5G and the spying. And we had bipartisan agreement on this. And this actually started in the 70s with Richard Nixon. You know, Nixon's credited with opening the door to China. What he didn't realize was China was opening the door to us.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, China's economy is in a bad place. This is what worries me about potential for war in Taiwan, is among 16 to 25-year-olds, the unemployment rate is over 20%. Xi Jinping, who was forced to live in a cave when he was 12 years old, I think he lived in a cave for about 2 years during the Cultural Revolution under Mao, and basically did subsistence work on farms, has urged young people to go to the farms. Well, they're not going to do this. They've gotten used to a middle-class lifestyle. And so when countries get in bad economic condition and China's biggest fear is internal, unrest internal. Yep. I'm really concerned about it. And I brought something I should have made a copy of it, but this shows comparatively, guys, where China was militarily with us, and I think this was 1999. So right.
Okay.
This is where we are now.
Oh man.
And each one of those emblems for a fighter plane represent 25 fighters, 25 bombers, but they have ramped up their military like you wouldn't believe. But at the same time, I think they understand that from an equipment perspective, except on hypersonics, they don't match us.
I was about to ask that. Do they have the same capabilities? They're still not quite there.
They have a fourth generation fighter that's really good, but it's no match for what we have. They probably are close to having twice as many surface vessels as us. Their submarine force is emerging, but our this new Columbia class that's coming out, there's nothing like it in the world. Russia has a very high tech sub now, but they still don't match what we have. Where I'm concerned about where we are is on hypersonics, and we now have ship based and land based, but we're still working to get our airborne, air launched hypersonics worked out. But the world is in a tough place right now. And
just to give it back to you, though, just from the little bit we've talked about, and I'm run out of time here, and I want to be respectful of your time. But it sounds like we can get out of, say, a debt crisis. We can meet challenges like the rise of China and so many other things if we actually tap the immense assets we have as a country.
that plus address the spending in a smart way, grow our economy. You're not going to grow yourself out of this debt crisis, but here's the thing: we don't have to get to zero debt. We need to get in that 60 to 70% debt to GDP. And I think we can get there over the next 15 to 20 years. And Jody Arrington from Texas, who chairs the budget committee, and I have spent, I don't know how much time on this. But one of the first things I did when I got to Congress, I was on the budget committee my first 2 terms, was address the whole issue of improper payments. We're sending out $300 billion a year in improper payments. Guys, over a 10-year period, that's $3 trillion plus interest because we're borrowing money to send it out. We're collecting somewhere north of $500 billion a year in fees, fines, court awards, lease payments, water sales, stuff like that, that doesn't go to Treasury. So I introduced the Agency Accountability Act to have that go to Treasury subject to being appropriated by Congress. I haven't been able to move it yet. But I think if we can get President Trump in, that will be a priority. So you start looking at this stuff, and there's a way to do this. And we got to think longer term how to do it, and have the patience to do it, and the personal discipline. And I think if we launch an initiative like I'm talking about, this Western Hemisphere Alliance, and it's focused on energy and private investment, not government foreign aid.
Right.
Private investment. And when I've met with these leaders, and particularly in Latin America, I've had a very simple message for them that money is just like water. It will always seek the path of least resistance. If you want private investment to come in here, create a structure where it makes sense to make an investment.
Amen. And well, I feel like we just scratched the surface. I feel like I could talk to you the whole 3 hours of the show, but I know you've got a busy schedule. If folks want to check out how they can help you, if they're listening saying, ooh, I'd like to donate to his campaign for re-election, or I'd like to volunteer, how can they do so?
You should have asked me a policy question. It's www.palmerforalabama.com.
And for spelled out FOR?
Yes, sir.
PalmerForAlabama.com. Well, I appreciate your time today. You're always welcome back, sir. Open door policy, and best of luck in the race. I have a feeling I'm going to be seeing you and your competitor a good bit here as we get up at the elections on Super Tuesday. So
yeah,
it'll be a fun time. But
well, Joey, I really appreciate you letting me come on and talk policy. That's kind of my wheelhouse. The last thing that I'll say about this is go to our website. I chair the policy committee, and we've tried to turn that into the Republican think tank, and it's republicanpolicy.house.gov. And look at what we've done with the guide to the issues. If you want to know where we are on these issues, you can. It's a public-facing website. Just take a look.
Well, I again really appreciated the work you're doing up there, and well, best of luck, sir, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Joey.
Thank you.